Hello and welcome to the Quarantine Book Club. Tonight we have our debut author, Jennifer Rosner, who last month we read her book, The Yellow Bird Sings, and we're going to talk to her about her experience with putting out a debut novel during the pandemic, and we'll take your questions as well. And as usual, I'm going to go over, introduce everybody. Who you can't see is the Passionistas Project, and this event is hosted by Amy and Nancy Harrington, sisters who founded the Passionistas Project to inspire women to follow their passions through their podcast. Regular live events and a subscription box filled with products from women-owned businesses and female artisans. Join them on their Facebook page on Monday, March 15th at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to celebrate International Passionistas Day. Check out their page for the recipe for the Passionistas Passion Fruit Mezcal Margarita. Oh my, their signature cocktail, created by Chef Susan Feniger and brought to you by the upcoming Liz Lockman film, Susan Feniger, Forked. You can find out about all of this and more at thepassionistasproject.com. And if you guys would post that link in the comment page, that would be awesome. Tonight, we are privileged to have Jennifer Rosner with us. She is the author of The Yellow Bird Sings, called Exquisite, Heartrending, an absolutely beautiful and necessary novel, which I totally agree with, by the New York Times Book Review, and a finalist for the 2020 National Jewish Book Award. Her previously published books include the memoir, If a Tree Falls, A Family's Quest to Hear and Be Heard, and the picture book, The Mitten String. In addition to writing, Jennifer teaches philosophy. She received her BA from Columbia University and her PhD from Stanford University. She lives in Western Massachusetts with her family. So welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
And we have my co-admin, Susan. And so, as usual, we are going to start out talking about the regular questions that I ask of all the debut authors, because this has been a very difficult year. Well, 2020, and I'm sorry, but 2021 still feels like 2020. So I asked this of everybody. When did you start writing this book?
I started writing it a really long time ago. I got the idea for this novel 10 years ago. I was actually at a book of talk for my memoir, If a Tree Falls, and I was talking because that memoir has to do with the deafness in our family, and I was discussing how we were encouraging our children to make sound, to vocalize and be loud, and in the audience was this woman who described her childhood experience of having to be completely silent in a shoemaker's attic with her mom hiding during World War II, and just the juxtaposition where I was, we were so happy with every sound our kid was making and thinking about a mom who had to keep her child silent. So that was when that first seed of the novel kind of took hold. And she was this hidden child of the Holocaust who I interviewed. And from her, I met many others to interview. So it took a long time in terms of interviewing and research, etc. So it has been brewing a really long time.
Yeah. So I want to get into your research because I love research. So how long and where did your research take you?
Yeah. So first, I was in that interview process where I was just meeting and talking to hidden children who are, elderly at this point, but they were children during the war, and hearing all kinds of their experiences, very different stories. Some were either, in these tiny spaces having to be silent and still, others were hiding in plain sight, on a farm. There was someone who had been carried, over a ghetto wall in a suitcase. I mean, all kinds of things. And I was just sort of soaking up a lot of the details, some of which I think are actually stranger than fiction, and that if you had proposed to your editor that you would include a line of some of the stuff that happened, they'd be like, that's ridiculous. But in fact, I was hearing all kinds of just incredible things, and eventually sort of set them all aside because I didn't want to write any one of their stories. I thought maybe they'll write them, or their children or grandchildren will. But so I just started to then create my own story that was really infused in the emotionality of the stories I had heard. And after writing a draft, or then maybe 10,000 drafts, after I got something together on the page, I wanted to go to Poland because I felt, first of all, I just really needed to cross-check what was happening. So I was here in Western Massachusetts, imagining the barn and the convent and the, the forest, et cetera, and looking online and doing like walking by Earth, Google Earth, et cetera, but not feeling totally confident. And especially with the Holocaust, you just really you want to make sure you're not saying anything false. So I sent my manuscript in advance to a guide who was incredible. So he read my manuscript, and my eldest daughter and I went to Poland. He took us to the settings of the novel. He found there was this area of farmland where there were barns, quite like the barn I had imagined, actually. But what I got to see are these things that you might not know. So you think of hiding on a farm as having a lot of space and land because you're on a farm, right? But in this little village, for community reasons, their houses were very close together. And then the farm land went in these tight swaths going back behind. So actually to hide someone in your barn would be very hard. Your nearest neighbors are very close by. And they were snooping. Like even when we went to visit, the guide brought us at one point to just see this beautiful Orthodox church. And when we came back, some neighbor there said, "Why did you turn left out of the parking lot? Not right." Even they were snooping on us, because we were strangers. And like, this is this little teeny village in Poland where everyone knows everyone. So I just was realizing how it would be like that this, mother and daughter would be hiding in this barn. And the other kind of irony about that is we first saw the barn area when we got there, my daughter and I. So we're in there, there's some guide, this man I've been on, the computer with, and the driver and some other guide he brought along. So there were these three men and my daughter and I, and we were lodging together in this remote thing. And, like in the countryside of Poland, and we were all in the same little house, but we had, our own room. And I was like, have I recreated the stress of being in this space with this man, whatever. And they all turned out to be terrific people and there was no risk. But I really felt like the fear, I don't know, sometimes we recreate our stories so that we can feel the emotional, tension. And then but in any case, at night he sat with me. He read out passages of Polish books that weren't translated, but he thought they'd be relevant to me. So passages he thought would be relevant, he was reading to me. We had these big discussions about the names I had chosen because, I had picked names that he said were, like Anya was going to be the mom's name. And he was like, Anya's a really, reasonable Jewish Polish name, but it has an economic connotation that I think your character doesn't share. Just these tiny things. And we agreed Rosha would be a more humble name, or like a more kind of appropriate for her. So details like that, I just feel like I could never have gotten by Googling names and looking at behind the name or whatever, just these details. So in addition to the farmland, he took us to this convent area. Actually, a Jewish child had been hidden in the convent. I got to see the partition and, hear what your feet are on the steps and the smell of the soup and all these kind of details that were really helpful. And then we went to this area of forest where partisans had camped, much like this kind of area where there was a family camp. Really dense, freezing cold. We went in December because my character has to make it through winter and I wanted to know. And my daughter is like, what? Like, what? It's like, maybe you could set your next novel in Greece and, in May or, some perfect time. And that was just like the travel part of that. And then I also went to Tel Aviv because the grandfather's a violin maker and the granddaughter's a violinist. And there's this amazing violin maker in Israel who has been rescuing violins from Holocaust times and rebuilding them. And they're played around the world in these orchestras. And I wanted to meet him and talk to him about the violin. But in addition to that, it was just like a lot of consultations with various people because I don't know, for everyone who writes a novel, you realize you just go down these tiny roads that you know nothing about, and all of a sudden you're like, I have to know, how is someone going to walk through the woods without leaving a trace? So I worked with a forest tracker and a mushroom forager and a nun to know the convent rules, and mostly this masterclass violinist who helped me understand how my prodigy would really practice and what piece would come first and how she would learn, because she would learn in a way that other violinists don't learn because she's a prodigy. So there was a lot. There was so much about it. It was really kind of amazing.
So how long were you in Poland?
A couple weeks, and going, just to these different settings, and he brought us to other things too within Warsaw, etc. But he mainly, because he had read it, it was a very efficient and amazing trip, because he kind of knew what we needed to see, or what I needed to see. My daughter didn't need to see these things, but she was kindly accompanying me. It was fun. Yeah.
So I'm sure you have thanked him profusely in your.
Oh yeah, I have. Yes.
Yeah. People don't think that you have to do research for a fiction novel. It's like, oh, you can just Google it. It's like, no, you really need to go to places and smell it and feel it, and and it's like, for me anyway, it's important to get those details right.
Yeah.
And so I think for your book, you really, I've never been to Poland, but I could really feel that you had done your research. That really showed through in the book. All right, next question. Did you already have an agent for the manuscript, or from your memoir? You didn't have
Well,
to
my journey, my journey is circuitous to the publication of the novel, because I did have an agent for my memoir, and then I was writing the novel, and I don't know, something about it bothered her, and then something else bothered her, and something else, and we were kind of going around, and I just felt that it was a moving target, and it was kind of this thing where I think it was just triggering her, actually. Which makes sense, and it's, I think she has also had family lost in the Holocaust, and it was a difficult match, and we decided very graciously and friendly to part ways. But one thing that happened was, so at that point I didn't have an agent, and I was going to be sending out queries, etc. There was, when my memoir had been sent around, I had gotten this kind of really touching rejection letter from a publisher, from an editor, who said she just loved my writing, but she felt like the book couldn't be big enough for her list, like that it was too quiet, which is a tendency of mine. And so I decided I would just get in touch with her and see if she might be willing to read this manuscript, because she had seen my writing already. So I said, I wrote and said, you gave me the nicest rejection letter. I wondered if you'd be willing to read this novel. And she said she would, and she took it. And then she said, I'm going to buy this novel, and now you need an agent. So you can call whoever you want, because I'm buying it, and they'll agree, because the deal's done,
Oh my gosh.
So it was really backward, which I have found in this industry to happen to me all the time. Because even getting my first agent felt like that too, where I was an academic, and I really wanted to leave philosophy as a full-time gig, but I had to do this swan song. I ended up editing an anthology called The Messy Self, and it was about the nature, the nature of self through the history of philosophy always has this privilege of what's harmonized and idealized. And I was like, what about the fractured self? What about the ambivalent self? What about the one where the self I know, the one, the one that's really a messy self, and not this kind of unified and organized thing. And so I ended up creating this anthology, and one of those writers, who was a really high and amazing writer and very well published, was like, you should get in touch with my agent, see if we can't make this like a big commercial book. And so that was, again, this is the way it seems to happen for me, these sort of random ways where I got in touch with that agent, and she was like, yeah, this isn't going to be a big public book, like a public thinking book, because it's just too kind of peculiar, but why don't you send your memoir pages to this other person I know? And then that's how I got my memoir agent. So I don't know, it just feels so idiosyncratic and kind of lucky or something. People send their query out, and who knows why someone says yes or no. I think it's such a long haul for us writers, and all we can do is persist and try every door and see who opens it. And yeah.
So my next question is how long did it take to sell to a publisher? But you got sold to a publisher, and then you got the agent.
Exactly.
So
exactly. It's all backwards.
Like bada boom, bada bing.
Yeah.
So when did your book come out in 2020?
it came out March 3rd. That was
Oh.
like right when it was all falling apart. I mean, I did 3 things in person. The first one where everyone gathered, but a few people were kind of scared to give hug. The second one where, people, were spaced out. And the third where like 3 people showed up and they were like, and then I was like, yeah, it's probably not going to happen anymore. And I was supposed to go all around the US. I was supposed to go to London. It all got canceled. And, but I have to say the weird thing about it is, Zoom took over or whatever. It became the new thing. And interestingly, it's kind of enabled. I've done events in Israel. I've done some in New Zealand. I did something in London. I mean, I've been able to do things I never, ever, ever would have been able to do. No one was sending me to New Zealand, I'm positive. And though I'd really like it. So, it is what it is, but I was right in the thick of it. And we all were pivoting at the same time, like my publicists had no idea how to, none of us knew sort of how to do this new thing. And that's where like all those people who I finally learned about reading with Robin and Zibby Owens, I mean, I hadn't known about this world really. But it was interesting and eye-opening, and they're all, really all these book supporters and bookstagrammers, and, it was a big learning. It's hard for me because I'm not tech savvy, and I'm always like by accident writing a message in Instagram and then deleting it and then like putting a heart in the wrong place, and everyone's like, yeah, but
yeah, that's me too.
Yeah. I know. I should say in my bio, like, I'm old. I don't know how to do it, but there are people older than me that seem to be doing it better. I don't know.
I know some people, I don't know. I would rather just not have to deal with any of the marketing internet stuff that, we have to do as writers. Even when you're with a large publishing house, you still have to do a lot of it yourself. So was your book launch, that was your first event? So what did you do? Did you do anything special, or was it just like an event at a bookstore?
Yeah, I mean, it was really nice. I mean, it was our local independent bookstore with very dear people from like, we've been in this area for a while, and just people from all out of the woodwork came. It was really, really, really nice. And yeah, it was lovely. It was sort of a taste of what might have been had we kept going, because most of my book tour had like anchors where I had friends or some people who would have shown up, and it would have been really quite fun. But
we know.
you know so well.
Yeah.
Yes.
So okay, Susan, she's going to talk to you about something.
Oh yeah, I always have a couple of questions that I like to ask all the authors, because I was an elementary reading teacher, and I was thinking about this book, and I did read a lot of Holocaust books with my kids, juvenile and young adult novels over the years. But what did you read when you were growing up? What was on your nightstand, or what were you like as a kid, as a reader?
I know. Okay, well, I gotta say that I have essentially I have amnesia of most everything up until like I'm 10 or 11. It's a long story, and I don't know. I felt like, one of the most important books that I've experienced both as a kid and then as a mom of 2 daughters was Half Magic by Edward Eger. Do you know this book? It's such a terrific book. It's about these 4 siblings, and they find this little magic talisman coin or something, and it has this power to grant you half of what you wish for. So if you want something, you need to wish for it twice. But it gets into like just very interesting situations when you get half as much, or if you overdo it, whatever. So I don't know, that book was so amazing, and
I've never heard of it.
Half Magic, I really loved that book. And also loved the All of a Kind Family things, that series. Do you know All of a Kind Family? Oh wow! All right. Well, you'll have to take a look.
I'm going to have to see. This is why I asked that question. Usually, the answers are pretty much the same across the authors. And
oh, what are they? I want to know.
too. A lot of people do Nancy Drew. We had Little House on the Prairie. The typical American, Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
What were the trying to think what
Judy
my
Blume.
Yeah.
Judy Blume.
Yeah. I remember my sister reading a lot of Judy Blume.
Hey,
Yeah.
you got different answers there. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I like that you asked that because I always learn of new books.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Too. So, and I have to tell you too that one of my favorite places I know to shop is Costco, and just because it's wide open and they require masks now. But before that, I think it was my hoarding tendency.
You want a life supply of mayonnaise. Yeah.
Yes, that's what I bought today. Yes, I went today. And I bought your book the first time I could go back into Costco after the shutdown. And I was just wheeling by and I saw the yellow press. I love, look, what? That's one of our books. That's one of the books Pamela has. So I was really excited to see you in Costco. And then that same day, and I may have said this, I opened up my Costco magazine that I got in the mail. And there you were. I thought, oh my gosh, the heavens parted. And your book never came up in the year that we were selecting books. We had, the membership selected books. We did a spinorama where we chose books. I don't know. We did all different ways to choose books, and that one never came up, and I bought it. So when Pamela let me choose the book for March, that was nice, and that's why or was it February? I don't know what month it is or day it is.
Yeah. It's okay. Well, thank you for choosing it.
Oh, yeah, and it would, it was worth it. It was worth the wait. Thanks. So, how'd you get in Costco? Was that your publisher? You just got
Yeah, they told me I was a penny's pick. So that's what happened. I don't know how any of it works. And yeah.
Yeah, you were a penny's pick. That's what I read in the book. So
Yeah.
So is there film interest in this book at all?
We have not, my agent, I don't know, she kind of put it forward to a couple of people early on, and they were talking about how historical fiction isn't necessarily, it's not the right time or something, and she's backed off. And since then, of course, you always hear that there are historical fiction things that are getting made into things, but no news on that. And I think no real effort either to get it to happen. So maybe the paperback will be out, and then maybe I'm gonna circle back on that stuff and see what might be, because it's funny, when I think about, how everyone has these dreams about what it would be like, and I remember just saying, look, can't we get in touch with the people who made Brooklyn, the movie Brooklyn? Because that movie is the most beautiful movie, and the book Brooklyn, it just took this book and made such a beautiful movie out of it. So anyway, that's my dream. I'm not sure I'll remember their names right now, but yeah, I had their names in my head for quite a while. The director and the screenwriter, they were so good. Yeah. So
you're in good company. We can't remember names either.
No.
But yesterday when we did our run through, I had mentioned the film Jojo Rabbit because we were talking about Susan's discomfort with the topic of the book, and she was reading the book that she bought. And I said, well, I enjoy reading a book that makes me feel sad, or listening to a song, or watching a movie that makes me feel sad. And then I brought up Jojo Rabbit, which I absolutely loved. I mean, there was a big humor element to that film.
Yeah.
But, it's a hidden child story. Yeah. And
yeah, maybe someday it'll be in the cards.
Have you seen that movie?
Yeah, I loved Jojo Rabbit. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
thought it was seen it yet, but I have a lot on my list. So
yeah,
it's on there now, or was on there before. We have a question over here from Linda Hendershot Newman.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, will there be a next book? Will the reunion be the next book?
Yeah, jumping to the end. um, well, so I have to say I've been working on a new novel that and there it has been in my mind that I want to explore their reunion, but I couldn't do so in this novel because we had met. Shira was 5 years old for the, she was a young child for the majority of the novel, and it was going to be 20 years later, and their relationship will have been much more complex. But also everything I've read about these reunions is that it can be very complex, and to honor the reality of that, I didn't want to just like make it so weird like runway ending, whatever. So in this new novel, up until like a week ago, there was definitely going to be a lot of attention on that. And now some other narrative lines have like shoved their way into my consciousness. And I think it will be there, but I'm not sure yet how. It's like I felt more sure about this a week ago, but I do want to treat that subject matter. I think it's really important.
I thought
So is it going to be about those characters, or is it a completely different story?
Well, in this one narrative line that I think will be staying, there was a brother and sister, completely unrelated brother and sister, whose storyline ends up that they're in a kibbutz, and there's this musical prodigy, Sophia, who the boy ends up with. And then there's like, by being with her, this thing unravels where her mother is at a concert and she calls from New York City, and was like, so so it was going to loop back around, and she was going to have sort of a cameo of sorts. But Susan, were you saying you felt like they met I think you were talking, we were Zooming at the same time. So what were you saying about it?
I thought the ending was beautiful.
Thank you.
It left me with such hope. I was, yeah.
Thanks. I found it interesting. Yeah, I found it interesting that it's like a projection screen for the reader, that some people find it hopeful and other people like are really not sure whether they ever see each other. But I know I've become like a funny, I don't know, school teacher where I bring the book out again and I read the last line out loud for them. Because I feel like it's really I'm not to say that it isn't clear, but I mean, first of all, she feels this bird on her shoulder, and then she blinks against the stage lights and looks in her direction, faint hope fluttering inside her like a yellow bird flying its way home. I mean, like, to me, it feels hopeful. I envisioned it this way. But for some people, I think without the actual next step, they wonder or can't feel sure. But I felt very convinced all the way through that I was never going to go past that moment. And in fact, the moment changed. Like at one point, the mom was very sick, and Shira has a concert in New York, but ends up finding that her mother's there, and she goes to the apartment. But then, the novel ends with the door opening. Like, I never get them like right there, because I felt like I just felt I would lose something. Like, I think you needed it to end where it's just about to happen, and it's up to you, kind of, you bring your part to this novel,
Well, and what I would have done with that as a teacher is, you take your stance and you defend it. What words make you believe that they got together, or that the bird flew away, went home without the meeting? So,
right.
I must be a pessimist, because I did not find it hopeful. I mean, I bawled. I was like, why didn't they?
That's why you cried.
I did. I bawled. I was alone in my studio, and I was listening to it, and it was uncontrollable. I was like, why couldn't they get together after all this time? I wanted them to be together.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so here I have this theory that I can't quite remember where I picked it up, but it's like, for writers and readers, we meet right here. And so, like, if I'll do I do my part and you do yours, and there's no one way to read it, because I'm bringing my associative mind and you're bringing your associative mind. And I mean, the one thing that seems true is that if I say too much, you're left with very little to do. And it's kind of, I think boring. If I don't do enough, you have to do everything and it's really tiring and you're frustrated with me. But if we meet right here, I've done what I'm doing, but you're also doing what you will. And so there's no single answer to that question, really, in a way. The book, I've given the book over and it's your read. And I think that's really hard for novelists when you're putting a book out, because that's how it is. I mean, everyone is going to take it and they're going to bring their own associative world, but not even only just to that. I mean, to kind of the tenor of it, to the pitch of it and the melody of it and everything. And so it'll read like hopeful or sad or melancholy or hope, whatever. I think it's just, it's up to both of us. Yeah.
So Susan's an optimist and Pamela is a pessimist.
Was there ever any doubt?
I've always been, people call me Eeyore.
Oh,
We got some comments from Amanda Cuba Wilson. Said, speaking of the end, I love the yellow bird coming back to the concert. How did the concept of the bird come about?
well, there was a few things. First of all, I had heard of a child who in a trauma had cupped her hands. She had gone silent and just cupped her hands. And this was sort of this mysterious way she had just taken on maybe something to take care of herself or something. And I had remembered that, and I wanted Shira to have a comfort in the barn. I wanted her to have something musical, possibly something that could sing out the music she felt inside. So the idea of the bird kind of emerged as a imaginary friend, as a comfort. She has her mother, which is more than many hidden children had, honestly. And she has this shred of a blanket, and she has the music inside her. But this bird, first of all, the bird could express her music, but also the bird kind of could give me the ability to, when I'm in a 5-year-old point of view and restricted by a 5-year-old point of view, the bird kind of enabled me to add subtext so that there could be an emotional layering, because the bird could be pecking, or the bird could burrow down lower in a snit, or something could happen where there was an extra ability to express emotion, and mostly emotion through the bird. So I really appreciated that came about. So.
And Rachel Kinsler Black said the ending definitely felt hopeful and she loved it. So
Rachel, come sit by me. Yes.
Yeah. So the pessimist comes sit at my table. We'll we can cry together over her.
Yes. Yeah, I thought the bird, we talked last night a little bit about imaginary friends and children that have imaginary friends.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that I wanted the bird to feel almost possibly like it could have been a real bird that got in the barn, because from her point of view, it feels real. So I wanted there to be at least some time where you're wondering, is this an imaginary bird or is this bird actually a bird in the barn? And when I picked yellow, it was kind of on the edge, like it could be a yellow bird. So it was a realistic color for that, but had also these, elements like stars in the sky are yellow, the yellow star from the clothing, there was an association with that. And also because, I don't know, at least maybe I'm making this up, but was it from the language of flowers that I decided that yellow is a color, like the color of friendship or something? But this was her friend, this bird, and it kind of morphed along with her. But
yeah, it did. And the bird actually transformed into not such a nice bird and not so pretty.
Yeah, exactly. Grew talons and got gray. Yeah, and then went black in the yeah, I mean, I purposely wanted this bird to be able to inhabit and express a lot of things.
So, well, I said that I had trouble with the beginning of the book, and it was written beautifully. It was just the subject matter, and having, dealt with kindergartners and all. I can't imagine that would have been hell for me trying to keep a kindergartner quiet. But the character, once you brought in the other two women into the forest, for me, that was when the shade went up and I was like, oh, I can do this. And I loved those two women. So where did they come from?
Yeah.
Mary,
Well,
Mary and Hannah.
yeah, I mean, let me first say something, which is that there's a real shift. I mean, when they're in the barn and they can't move, they have to stay still and they can't speak. I mean, you're supposed to feel stuck and
Yeah.
it's a claustrophobic situation, and the pacing reflects that. And then when the mother moves her body out into the woods, the pacing of the story changes, so that like that's why you felt air got let in to the story, because she left the barn and the air hit her face and she was on her way moving her body. So I mean, I think that it's hard, it's painful to experience these things, but I think I was trying in each specific scenario to sort of be like, what would this really feel like? And then with the friends, I mean, I just was aware that there were a lot of people hiding in the woods and, kind of unbelievably surviving these crazy conditions. And I'm not really sure like what inspired me to populate her life, but she needed to probably not be, I don't think she could have survived in complete solitariness in the woods. And there were other people and it was safer. And then people not only congregated like that to move through the woods, but they found these family camps, which were unbelievable, really. And that helped them survive.
Yeah. And you did a beautiful job with that, because I really did. And I'm pretty empathic, I guess. And I do get into characters, and I was trapped in that barn and I went free with her, and it was lovely. And I loved Hannah, and I'm a foodie, so I really appreciated her. I'd probably be the one in the woods saying, "What? You didn't bring back the right mushrooms? What? You're foraging and you didn't do
Right,
it."
exactly.
I have a question that's probably, I don't know about this, but Susan and I had talked about it earlier when she had finished the book. We asked each other, would you be able to let your child go off? And I guess I'm the Eeyore, and I'm like, I don't think I could. I think I would think that
I would.
and she would. And so I'm wondering, when your research, what were a lot of the circumstances of these kids?
Yeah.
Was it kind of a forced situation, or did parents go, you'll be safer here?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a huge mixture of, I mean, I think everything happened. That's how it feels. Like when I read and have spoken to people, it just seems like every scenario. There were parents who could not part with their children. There were children who didn't want to part from their parents, but their parents kind of had to force them through the fence, the gate, throw them over the whatever. I mean, something so they would live. There were cases where, I mean, one thing that struck me, and what's kind of at the emotional heart of this novel, I think, is that, no one felt, everyone had some guilt and some shame over what they did, even when they did things so that someone would survive, or even if they were the person that was done to, so they would survive. So I would talk to these people who are 80 years old, or 75 at the time or whatever, and their parents gave them up so they would live. And there is so much pain there, so much hurt. And as if maybe they would have really just rather held their hand and gone into the gas chamber. Like the pain of being let go was so profound. And I imagine the guilt of doing so also, even though you're saving your child. I don't think there was any way out of this brutal situation that felt okay, and that's where, like, when all the stuff was happening at the border, and I'm thinking to myself, 75 years later, there are going to be these children who are so hurt, because I'm talking to those people who are, this old, and they're so hurt by this thing, which was for their survival, and the circumstances were different. But I don't know. I think that there were also these weird, like, I don't know, conceptual issues, like, there would be Jews afraid to give their children to a Christian family, because they felt not only were they going to lose their child from themselves, but they were going to kind of give away a Jewish child of some, there were like, kind of other considerations that were somewhat paralyzing for people whose life was built around religion. All these kind of different dimensions that were going on at the time. But I don't know, like, I think that in the case of my story, there was this very close connection, and the music was connective tissue, and they were very, very linked. But this mother, I think, just realized that she can't risk it and that she has to put this child somewhere. And the thing is that then she berated herself. She got to the family camp and there were people who had their children, and she said, I might have been able to bring her with me. She could have maybe made it. And I purposely had a child die in the next minute, because you want to know, like, you might have made it and you might not have made it. That's how it was then. There was no right answer, and everyone was just struggling to get through, and no one knew what was right. And I think that, like, layered in with that is the kind of real emotional tenor of the fact that, like, for a minute, the mom is happy that she has a second not with a child on her body. And for a minute, the daughter has this flash of a wish that she could go elsewhere and not be stuck in a barn. Like, we do have those things, like we have them, and it's so hard to kind of admit or whatever, especially under these things, but that the overarching thing was this incredibly deep bond and love between a mother and child, despite all the kind of blurry moments.
Yeah.
So why does Shira's name change 3 times throughout the story?
Yeah, I mean, so one thing that inspired that decision was I was at the Holocaust Museum when I saw this pamphlet. It says, "Remember Me," and there's this girl with, and in the back, there's all these other children. And the thing is, this question, "Remember Me," is like this literal, do you remember me? Because if you did, you would tell me what village I'm from so that I could find my family and I could figure out who I am. And I was just struck by what happened with children where, they'd have a name that would be perceptibly Jewish. They would change it to a Christian name to be sent into a safe home or a convent or somewhere. And they were 5 or something, and they would lose the thread of their sense of self, their identity. They wouldn't know their name. They don't remember their parents' name. They were 5, whatever. And then when the war ended, what do you have? I mean, it was a complete mess. And you would get off you'd get off if you even found somewhere close to get off the train station that might be near your home village, you'd come and there'd be like a fence with like 1,000 names tacked to it, like fluttering in the wind. And, in a completely unsystematic way of, whatever. So I thought it was just really important that we understood that, unlike today, where, you want to meet your 2nd grade friend, Nancy, whoever, you just go on Facebook and like find her, but there was
just a DNA test and you find out that Nancy's your sister.
Exactly. And this situation was just so different. And it was interesting to me as a matter of, I think there was that philosopher in me realizing, like, what is it that keeps us who we are over time? How much does it matter that I'm Jennifer Rosner or that I'm anyone else, like with some other name? I don't know. In some ways, I was talking about someone who is, they changed their name to a hybrid name, and their family tree is complicated by by that decision. So, what is in our names, et cetera, and just how much of a sense of self can we hold on to if we forget all of that? And, there was this woman, Irina Sendler, who was she rescued many, many children, and she had these names on a piece of paper, their Jewish name on one side, their Christian name on the other, buried in jars in her garden, which later, after the war, people unearthed the jars and were able to kind of connect and find. But having your names anywhere was incredibly dangerous. And there were cases of people putting parts of your name in 5 different notebooks and hiding them in all these different spots, but then putting them together later was like, and so there were attempts to keep a trail, but it was so dangerous to have one. So that was part of the tension on that.
Isn't it amazing that this didn't happen very long ago?
I know.
Yeah,
yes.
There are people still alive that went through that. And has DNA testing that you're aware of, have people had a big resurgence of family bonding? And
I'm not really aware of that situation where Holocaust survivors were testing and finding each other. The only case I'm more aware of is that there were situations of of unlawful like placements of children where the parent was told, you know, your child, you know, died over during their well visit and they're just not, you can't ever see, you know, like they were, we disposed of the body, you know, whatever. And then there's DNA testing and they have reclaimed them and like had found out that the person was actually adopted out to some well-to-do family and whatever. I mean, these kind of cases I've been reading about, but in terms of Holocaust survivors who just got scattered by the war, I haven't really heard that DNA, but it might be. I haven't checked.
Interesting.
Marilyn commented she had to listen to all the music that you mentioned, and how important was that for you? I mean,
Yeah.
I know some writers like to write with music; it inspires them, and
Yeah.
so did you depend on that the teacher in Poland to kind of give you the music to mention, or did you do more research?
I spent a long time listening to piece after piece, trying to decide what I wanted, where I wanted it, and then checking, would it be okay? Could she have learned this first? And then, you know, like making sure it would be okay. But there were certain pieces of music that had such resonance, and her teacher in my story is pointing her to music that some of which was banned, you know, by Germans, and that there was Jewish heritage or some kind of folk music heritage that would be familiar to her from her home life. And yeah, I mean, it was really important to me. Music, I wanted music to be this kind of thread, connective thread between her and her family. And I also wanted, because my father was sort of the inspiration for including music in the novel, I found that my father composed music that really, you could tell was this kind of searching for Jewish roots in some way, like you could hear it in the music. And I think that, you know, it's funny because like a lot of Jewish music has sort of a melancholic aspect. And then you go to the church where Shira went from listening to her parents play Bartok, you know, and these other musicians, and going to the church and hearing this like kind of glorious, differently ordered music. It's not as ragtag, it's not random, it's sort of orderly music, etc. I kind of wanted to really contrast her experience with music in the Christian setting and in the Jewish setting.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions here?
I have an event coming up where they hired musicians to play some of the pieces at the event, which I think is so amazing. Very excited for that. I've never had an event where there was a musical interlude. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, well, is it going to be live?
Yeah, I can put the Zoom link. I don't have it now, but I can put the event link. I can send it to you when it comes.
So it'll be a Zoom event, or is it?
Yeah, I think it'll be a Zoom event. It'll be a Zoom event where there's violinists playing this music from my novel at some point during the event.
Wow. I love that's really cool. Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear all that because I'm not a musical person. I'm married to a musician, but it's not in my DNA to be musical. So for me, I had to, you know, search a couple of things and listen to them. And then I thought, oh, that's above my head. But you described it so well that I understood the gist of it. So, and
yeah, I mean, I worked with this musicologist who helped me to listen to music in a way that I had not. I mean, I actually trained as an opera singer for some number of years. And, but in terms of listening to violin music and hearing like story in it, I didn't know how to do that. And then this guy, this musicologist, music historian, and I spent some time together, and it was eye-opening.
Do you still sing? I listened to your author's note at the end, and
gosh, my author's note is so mortifying because my narrator has such a gorgeous, like, I don't know, just such a lush and deep voice. And then I get on and it's like tin, you know. I was really sorry about that. I was like, can't you guys do anything about this? You know, no, you sounded fine. I'm like, come on. Well, maybe she had the British accent and all that.
She had all the accents. Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, she's a native Polish speaker, so
You could kind of catch, yeah, her accent. She's multilingual. So
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, so your author's note, I enjoyed that.
Thank you. Thanks.
The Audible version of the book is amazing.
It was. And I tried to review that and it wouldn't let me do it today, but I had Wi-Fi issues all day. So I'll try again.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
she did a lovely, did you get to choose your?
I did. I got to, it was so lucky. I mean, they let me, first they let me suggest names, but secondly, they put forward 6 and I could listen. And then they said, we can have you audition them by letting them read some of your novel, not just like listen to them read something. And so that was really informative and helpful because, you know, some of the terrific narrators that, you know, have been, I've loved for certain books were so dramatic with my novel. And I was just like, I just don't think we need to add that. Like, I think it's already a lot. And like for it to be really dramatized, I just didn't think it would be right. And so I passed on names, you know, who's I've been listening to them, you know, narrate these books. They're amazing, but I just didn't feel they'd be right for me. And I really loved Anna Koval, who narrated my novel. I thought she's a sort of an unknown British actress getting into audio narration. It was like one of her first jobs, but I was like, yeah, and I'm a new author getting into mine, so I'm going to choose you, and it will, you know, we'll just do this thing together. And I really liked her.
She was all the words that I looked up for her, how she made me feel were soothing almost. She had a soothing and she didn't struggle with the pronunciation. I got that. It's
yeah. I know when I know they would have gotten it over time, but some of the ones who auditioned, it was like jumping a hurdle to say, they would be like, and in the Zimyanka, and you know, like that. And you're like, okay, we got it. You know, it's just funny. And I know they would have like smoothed it all out and it would have become normal, but I couldn't quite go for it. It felt very funny.
Yeah. I did an audition for my first book, Death Becomes Us, which is nonfiction. And I auditioned people, and some of the people was just like, death becomes us. I was like, what?
Oh, exactly.
Wow. It was
well, for my memoir, I wanted to narrate it, but they wouldn't permit, they didn't even consider that. They had to hire, and it's so terribly narrated that I listened to like a line, I was like, just turn it off. You know, this is really bad. It's especially hard when it's your personal story, like that's being narrated terribly by someone else. You know, and I was like, come on, I mean, you should, but then I've also heard of writers narrating their own, and you think, yeah, an actor would have been good. So I don't know, maybe, you know, some you win some, you lose some. So
well, I think you definitely won on this one.
Yeah.
And about the cover, did you where'd the cover come from? I love it.
Thank you. The hardback cover, is that what you mean?
Yeah, we have it.
The hardback cover. What I loved about this, well, when I went to Flatiron in New York, and I met, you know, when I met with my publishing team, they had 2 choices of possible covers they were thinking about. And one was like very dark and gray, like a forest with these little beams of yellow light, which was really cool. But it just seemed really, really dark. And then they had this, but this was a full photograph, like it wasn't torn at all. And we were there talking, and then I don't know, someone was like, you know, what if it was torn because something's torn in the story, because this child is torn from her mother, because, you know, it's the war and it's, you know, on the black background, etc. And I thought that was just pretty brilliant. And I don't know, they just did such a good job.
Yes.
Well, and the date on the upper left part, the date was there. And I just kind of thought it was the photo that she kept in her clothes as she escaped. So
yeah, I thought they did. They're those graphic people are really impressive, aren't they? Like the way they make these covers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so we're like almost at the end here. We've just been chatting. We have 4 more minutes, so we need to wind up, and we have 2 books to give away from Jennifer's publisher. So I know Nancy has the Wheel of Fortune. And you know what, Susan? I entered our names in this because we've never gotten any free books. And I think,
Smart.
why not?
I bought every single book that we've done. So I have
Me
14
too.
books. And
Well, I hope you will win.
let's see. Okay, so the first one is going to be for, what was the first title? One was Miss Austen and the other one was
The Paris Hours.
the Paris Hour. So this one is for the Paris Hour.
what is the-
Okay, who's our Linda? Oh my goodness, there's sound effects.
Awesome.
Okay, and the next one is for Miss Austen. She is one of our very lucky members. I think she's bought every book and posed with every book through the whole year, and she's
so
one of
nice.
the books. So
She
good for you.
engages. She does engage with us, and
She even donated blood for my book launch. So,
yay!
Yeah.
Winners.
so thank you so much, Jennifer, for coming and talking with us.
Thank
today.
you. Thanks so much for, having me and reading the novel. And I love your book club and it's awesome. So
Thanks
it was
for
really,
writing. It was a beautiful story. Thank you for.
thank you. But also this thing you do, which has kept everyone, I think has helped us survive through this pandemic with all the ways you've encouraged reading and writing and, engagement with authors and writers and readers. So
Thank you.
Yeah,
I know that everyone's kind of tired of the Zoom events, but I really enjoy them. And I used to only go to a couple author events throughout the year because they have a lot at the DMA in Dallas. But I didn't get to go because sometimes it was expensive to go see an author. So I love that I get to talk to all these different authors and meet people, and it's fun.
yeah.
I like that it's recorded and I can always find it somewhere and go back and listen to it on YouTube or on our Facebook
Yes.
page or.
It stays on our Facebook page and it's on YouTube as well. So
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you.
thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Amy and Nancy Harrington, the Passionistas.
We
We
couldn't do it without you.
we couldn't do it without you. And next month we are reading The Queen of the Owls. We're reading The Queen of the Owls, but we're going to be talking with Barbara Lynn Probst on April the 13th. We've changed the date so you have more time to finish that book. So thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.